Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a player guide on Parker Robbins, aka the Hood. He's one of my personal favorite characters to play. We'll be going over some pros and cons, some gameplay, some tips, where I use them, synergies, awakening chat, and so much more. So basically this guide is for new players not familiar with them, and of course veteran players that are not familiar with them as well. So let's get started. So the first pro I want to talk about and ability is his ability to turn invisible. He actually has two ways that he can do this. There's actually a third method as well that we'll talk about later on in the video, but we'll stick to the two main ones first. The first one is he has to dodge back, hold his block for 1.5 seconds, and then he turns invisible for 8 full seconds. While he's invisible for these 8 seconds, opponent's melee attacks have a 90% chance to fail, like you just saw there, and regular attacks have a 45% chance to fail. Now there is another way that you can turn invisible, and that is to launch your special 2 attack. After the special 2 attack is done, as you're going to see here in a moment, you will turn invisible once again for 8 seconds. During that time, you have a 105% increase to your critical damage while you're invisible, and also you ignore armor and block proficiency by 75%. But the main reason people like to turn invisible are obviously to avoid specials that are hard to dodge. Punisher here, SP1, Punisher 2099 SP1, Spider-Man's SP1, the list goes on. Just remember it's a 90% chance, so if you're just going to run in and take a chance, there's always that 10% chance you're going to get hit. I think we're going to see here I'm going to run in after a special 1, and one of the missiles is going to hit me. He's about to do his attack. See, normally I try to run in, see I got hit right there in the end, so sometimes you do get hit. So let's move on to the next ability. So the next pro I want to talk about is the ability to stagger the opponent. You have a 60% chance to do this per critical hit, and basically what it does, it will stop a future buff from applying itself. Some people get confused and think that the stagger will cancel a buff that's already active. That's not the case. It will only stop a buff from starting, so you have to keep that in mind. So let's see the stagger in action. We'll go up against some champ system buffs. We have Hyperion here with his power gain. There's my stagger, so the next power gain that comes up will not work. There you go, power gain staggered. So it's very useful against Hyperion. Stops his constant power gain, which is a very annoying ability when you're going up against him. You also get a small percentage of health back every time you have a stagger expires. It's very small and you might not even notice it. It could be 2 to 5%. You really have to keep an eye on the health bar to notice it. Obviously I'm full right now, but you'll see it in the next fight. Now a stagger can be reinitialized by a heavy attack, or you can just do your regular attacks to try to keep it going at all times. Now the next guy we have is Venom. I believe this is Act 4. He has lots of buffs, so I can show you the stagger in its glory. You're going to see lots and lots and lots of staggering going on in this particular battle. I staggered his precision. So I got all his buffs down from his SP2. Now I'm going to start staggering lots and lots of his buffs. So we got it precisioned up right now. So we staggered his energy resistance. Again, the stagger can be used for almost any buff, so regeneration, armor ups, precision, energy resistance. Physical resistance is staggered right there. He really shines against champs with lots of buffs because he makes their abilities completely useless. So the next pro I want to talk about is the Special 2. It's a Hex, which basically fate seals the opponent for 6.5 seconds, which also cancels out any active buffs. It also reduces ability accuracy by 56%. And after you do your Special 2, you also turn invisible. So it's probably the one that you're going to be using the most. Again, it's only on active buffs, and if they're passive, it will not work. So I'll talk about passive a little bit later in the video. Definitely be the one that you're going to use the most. SP1 is nice, but the SP2 is probably the best out of the bunch. The next pro we're going to take a look at after the Special 2 is the Special 1. It's a shock and stun ability. It's pretty cool. It's really cool to watch. It's called Chaotic Lightning, as you can see coming out of his hands right here. It basically shocks the opponent for 7.5 seconds, dealing damage during those 7.5 seconds, and at the end of it, it actually stuns the opponent as well. It's a very quick stun at only 0.75 seconds, so I would suggest putting some mastery points into Stupefy if you want to take advantage of it. Also, the stun will not work if the opponent is in the middle of a special attack, so keep that in mind as well. So moving on from the Special 1 Pro, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about Awakening, Synergies, and his Special 3. Now, when it comes to Awakening, he does not have to be awakened to be a solid champ. Of course, awakening him makes him a better champ, but he's still quite solid without being duped. I probably would not use a gem on him if I had one. I'd just wait for the natural dupe. He gets some very nice abilities, which we'll talk about here in a second. So to show you a couple examples of the Awaken ability, first you have to be invisible, and then you have to wait for the cooldown. The cooldown period is after the invisibility expires. At that point I will be stun immune during the cooldown, which is right now. I'm going to let him hit me so I can get him to do a Special 1, because the Special 1 will stun me, and it doesn't work. So that's the first ability he has when he's awakened. Now the second ability he has awakened is also after the invisibility. You have to go into cooldown once again. He has a 50% chance to do a 10% power steal on every basic hit. And we're going to see that here. I cool down, there's the first power steal. I go in and attack. Power steal, power steal. Now it's only 10%, but everything helps, especially on a champ like Hyperion. So the next thing I want to talk about is Hood Synergies. He's got quite a few. These are my 4 favorites. He's got a few more with like Loki and Iron Patriot and Punisher that do critical damage or attack or block proficiency, but these are my top 4 that I really like, and we'll just go through them really quickly. One with Dormammu. Non-robot villain champions get a 20% chance to revive at 10% health when receiving a knockout blow. So basically if you are killed, you have a 20% chance to come back at 10%, so that's pretty cool. I also like this one with Dormammu as well. All champions gain plus 9% Special 3 damage. This one here with Kingpin is pretty cool. The hood gains 20% invisibility duration, so your invisibility will last a lot longer. This is a new one with Ghost. With Ghost, you start the fight with invisibility. You don't have to hold down the dash back and press block, or you don't have to do a Special 2. You start off with invisibility right out of the gate, so that's pretty cool. And lastly is the one with Sentinel. This doesn't really help Hood any, but it's pretty cool for Sentinel. Reduce the duration of the target's power lock effects by 50% and generates 50% power each time a power lock expires when facing a target of the Mystic class. You know, you're not going to use it too much, but you know, we all can't stand Mystics gaining power really quickly. So if you happen to have these 2 and you use them a lot, it's a nice little bonus. So that's a quick look at some of the synergies that he's got. So one thing I wanted to mention that I didn't mention in the pros list here is Mystic Dispersion. It's a very important mastery for Mystics, and that includes the Hood as well. Not only does it help you gain power while you attack against champs that have buffs, but it also helps you gain power in defense, which makes you more of a threat in Alliance Wars. So talking about the Special 3, it's a special you won't use too often, but when you do use it, it does more damage when the opponent has more power. For every power bar that the opponent has, you do 65% increased damage per power bar. It also does bleed for 6 seconds. You know, it's not a bad finishing maneuver, but you'll probably be sticking to your SP2 and your SP1 for the most part. Again, if you have deep wounds as a mastery, it's not a bad thing here because he bleeds for that 6 seconds, so it helped to extend your bleed damage. So now we're going to move on to the cons. The first one is he isn't the biggest damage dealer. Like many of the utility champs, he's a bit of a jack of all trades. He has many abilities, many cool features, but he doesn't strike particularly hard. His SP2 is pretty good, and when you're invisible, that helps your critical damage. But he's not a big hitter, so he's probably not the best champ for something like Labyrinth of Legends, or maybe taking on some of the big bosses in Alliance War, like perhaps a debuff immune. It might be a tough go for him. But, you know, he's not bad, but don't expect a Star-Lord or a Stark Spidey kind of damage coming out from him. So moving on from not being a huge damage dealer, we'll look at his next con. He has no immunities. He's not immune to bleed, he's not immune to poison, he's not immune to incinerate. So, you know, he's going to be taking some damage on particular nodes or against particular opponents. Yes, he has a little bit of healing that will help him, but it's very minimal, so you just have to be aware of that. So the next con we're going to look at is the invisibility is not 100% effective, and I want to talk about a few things about that. One, if it's just basic attacks, it's a 45% chance for the opponent to miss you. I wouldn't rely on that. And number two, if it's a projectile melee type attack, that's a 90% chance to miss. But we all know in this game that 10% seems to happen a lot, so a very low chance seems to happen. I kind of like to keep my invisibility as a safety net. I'll use my evading and dodging as much as possible, and we'll use the invisibility just in case it doesn't work and hope for the best. Now there's a few other things about invisibility. When you're actually invisible, I find you have to have your parry timing perfect. If it's off a little bit, they'll just miss you instead of actually parrying because you're invisible, and sometimes that can throw your timing off, so you got to be careful with that. And also sometimes when the opponent launches a melee special, like say bullets, and you decide that you just want to run right in, you can do that and you can run in, but sometimes you can run in almost too fast. And the time that you get to the opponent, he's just finishing his special, and you take a swing at him and you kind of miss, and it's kind of a weird laggy display, and you end up getting hit. So it's going to take a little while to get used to him, but once you get the hang of it, you'll do just fine. So the last couple cons that we're going to talk about are war defense and passive buffs. First, we'll talk about war defense a little bit. He's not a great defender, mostly because he's very easy to bait, his SP1. He has some uses on a special 2 node where he's more likely to use it, and you have high Mystic Dispersion because his SP2 is difficult for many people to evade, and you can only evade part of it. But in the long run, he's not very good. And all his cool synergies that you saw, like the one with Dormammu where he can revive if he dies. Right now, at least at the time of this review, defense war synergies do not work, so that makes it kind of useless as well. So the last thing I want to talk about is passive buffs. Lately, Marvel Contest of Champions have started to bring in opponents that have passive buffs, which means that we can't nullify or stagger them. Iron Man Infinity War is a perfect example. He has a molecular armor, as you can see there with the little blue going. Hood cannot stagger that armor, and he cannot take it down with his special 2. So you got to keep that in mind, that a lot of the new champions and new nodes that are coming in, he might not be able to nullify, which makes him a little weaker against those type of champs. So there you have it, guys. That's my guide on the Hood. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on what you think, and tell me if I missed something. I'm always learning the game just as you guys are, so I appreciate comments and likes and dislikes, and of course following the channel would be great. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Target identified. Analysis complete. Please subscribe.